Nadia Calloway woke up before the sun did. That was not unusual. It had been that way for as long as she could remember. The alarm at 5, the cold floor under her bare feet, the quiet shuffle to the kitchen before anyone else in the house stirred. By the time the Voss family came downstairs, breakfast was already on the table. The floors were swept, and Nadia had already carried 3 loads of laundry to the washroom in the basement. She did not complain. She never complained. The Voss house was large and beautiful from the outside, a wide colonial, with white columns, and a garden that Sylvia Voss showed off to guests every spring. People in Ravenmore admired it. They admired the family too. Gerald Voss was known for his generous donations to the local school. Sylvia organized the town's annual charity drive. Their daughter Petra smiled the right way at the right people. Nobody saw the inside of the house the way Nadia did. She had come to live with them when she was 9 years old, 2 weeks after her parents were buried. A car accident on a rainy highway, the kind of thing that happens in an instant and changes everything forever. The Vosses were her only living relatives, and so they took her in. Gerald had patted her on the head at the funeral and said, "You'll be fine with us." She had believed him. 15 years later, she was still waiting for fine to arrive. Her room was the smallest one in the house, next to the laundry room. It had one window that faced the brick wall of the neighbor's garage. Her meals were taken in the kitchen, standing at the counter, while the family ate in the dining room. When guests came over, she was introduced briefly. "This is Nadia, she stays with us." And then conversation moved on without her. She was not cruel to them in her heart. She had tried, for many years, to feel grateful. They had given her a roof, after all, food, a school to attend. But gratitude is a complicated thing when it is demanded every single day as payment for your own survival. Her one escape was the florist shop on Meridian Street, where she worked 4 days a week. The owner, an older woman named Mrs. Park, had hired her 3 years ago and never once treated her like a burden. Nadia loved the work, the smell of fresh flowers in the morning, the quiet concentration of arranging colors and stems into something that made people feel something. She was good at it, better than good. Her co-worker and closest friend was a woman named Demi, loud and warm, and completely unafraid of saying the things other people only thought. "You need to leave that house," Demi told her at least once a week. "I know," Nadia always said. "So when?" Nadia never had a good answer for that. She had nowhere else to go, no savings to speak of. The Vosses had always managed her money, what little she earned, arguing that they were keeping it safe for her. She had never seen a statement. She had never asked for one, because she had been made to feel, in 100 small ways, that asking for things was ungrateful. That was her life, quiet, invisible, and carefully small. And then came the invitation. The Voss family received it on a Thursday morning, a thick cream envelope with a gold seal. Gerald opened it at the breakfast table and read it twice before saying anything. It was an invitation to a formal gala at Wolf Estate, hosted by Caden Wolf himself. Everyone in Ravenmore knew the name Caden Wolf, even if very few people actually knew the man. He was the head of Wolf Industries, a company that had quietly grown over the past decade into something enormous. Real estate, development, private investment. He rarely appeared in public. He gave no interviews. He had purchased 3 large properties in the county over the past year, and nobody was entirely sure what his plans were. He was 34 years old and, according to Petra's internet searches, very easy to look at. Petra immediately began planning her outfit. Sylvia called her hairdresser. Gerald polished his good shoes. Nadia was told she would stay home and keep an eye on the house. She said nothing. She went back to the kitchen and started on the dishes. It was Demi who changed things. The florist shop had a contract to provide the floral arrangements for the Wolf Estate Gala, and when one of the delivery assistants dropped out last minute, Demi called Nadia and told her to put on something decent. "You're coming with me," Demi said. "You'll be working, technically, so nobody can say anything. The Vosses won't like it. The Vosses don't own you, not legally anyway. Come on." Nadia wore a simple black dress she had owned for 2 years. She pinned her dark hair up the practical way, not the pretty way. She was not going to be noticed. She was going to arrange flowers, help with the setup, and go home. That was all. The estate was stunning, old stone and warm light, Long corridors filled with the smell of candles, and something expensive she couldn't name. Guests arrived in cars that cost more than the Voss house. Nadia moved through it all like a shadow, carrying vases, adjusting centerpieces, doing the work. She was near the east corridor, fixing a cluster of dahlias that someone had placed completely wrong, when she heard footsteps stop behind her. She didn't look up right away. She was focused on the flowers. "Those were fine the way they were," a voice said. "They really weren't," she said. "The red ones were blocking the white ones. It looked unbalanced." She looked up then. The man standing in front of her was tall, dark-haired, and looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. He was wearing a suit that fit him the way expensive things fit people who don't have to think about expense. There was something still about him, the way deep water is still, calm on the surface, with a lot going on underneath. She didn't recognize him. "Could you move slightly to the left?" she asked. "You're blocking my light." He blinked. Then he stepped to the left. "Thank you," she said, and went back to the flowers. He stood there for a moment longer than was normal. Then he said, "You work for the florist?" "Yes." "The arrangements look good." "They will, once this one is fixed," she said. He almost smiled. She saw it at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, but the beginning of one, like a door opening just a crack. They spoke for a few minutes. He asked about the flowers, genuinely curious, not making conversation for the sake of it. She answered honestly. She told him that dahlias were underrated, that most people defaulted to roses because they didn't know what else to choose, and that white flowers at formal events were either elegant or boring depending entirely on how they were arranged. He listened like someone who was not used to being spoken to so directly. She never asked his name. When one of the event coordinators appeared and called him away with an urgent, slightly panicked look on her face, Nadia went back to her work and thought nothing more of it. She did not know, until Demi grabbed her arm 20 minutes later and whispered furiously in her ear that the man she had told to move out of her light was Caden Wolfe. Nadia looked across the room at him. He was speaking with a group of important-looking people, but as if he felt her eyes, he looked up. He met her gaze for just a second. Then someone said something to him, and he looked away. Nadia went home that night and told herself it meant nothing, a brief conversation at an event. He had spoken to 100 people that night. He would not remember her by morning. She was wrong. He found her in 3 days. She was at the shop, trimming stems, when Mrs. Park called her to the front and said there was someone asking for her. Nadia came out expecting a delivery mix-up or a customer complaint. Instead, it was Caden Wolfe, standing in the small florist shop on Meridian Street, in a coat that was too nice for the neighborhood, looking faintly out of place among the buckets of carnations and the handwritten price signs. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Not here, somewhere quiet. It's important." She almost said no, something in her, the part that had been trained for 15 years to stay small and not cause trouble, wanted to apologize for taking up his time and send him away. Instead, she untied her apron and said, "There's a cafe 2 streets over." They sat across from each other at a small table near the window. He ordered coffee, she ordered tea. He placed a folder on the table between them and did not open it right away. He told her that after the gala, something about their conversation had stayed with him. He had wanted to know more about her, not in a strange way, he said, but in the way that certain people leave an impression that is hard to explain. He had found out her name through the florist contract and had looked into her background, not deeply, just enough to understand who she was. What he found had not sat well with him. He opened the folder. He explained it carefully, without drama. Her parents had left a life insurance settlement, not a fortune, but a real amount of money, enough to matter, that had been placed in an account under the Voss family's management when she was a child. There had never been any transfer of that money to her when she turned 18. He had a financial contact who had traced the account. The money had been quietly absorbed. There was more. Her father, it turned out, had been an early and silent investor in a land deal that Gerald Voss had built significant wealth on. The original partnership paperwork had never been properly dissolved. Legally, a portion of what grew from that deal, a real and substantial portion, still carried her father's name. Nadia sat very still. She looked at the papers in front of her. She recognized her father's signature on one of them, and something moved in her chest that she didn't have a name for. "I'm not telling you this to upset you," Caden said. "I'm telling you because you deserve to know, and because I have people who can help you, if you want them to." She looked up at him. "Why?" she asked. "Why does this matter to you?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because someone should have told you a long time ago," he said, "and nobody did." She did not cry. She had learned, very early, to hold that particular door shut in front of other people. But she sat with the weight of what he had told her for a long moment, and she breathed through it. Then she said, "Okay." That was where it began. Over the weeks that followed, Caden's legal team began the careful work of pulling those buried documents into the light. Nadia met with lawyers for the first time in her life, and learned words like account mismanagement, and undissolved partnership interest, and rightful beneficiary. The lawyers were careful and professional. Caden was not involved in the legal meetings directly. He had connected her to the right people and stepped back, which she respected more than she expected to. But he did not disappear. He called, sometimes, in the evenings, just to check in, he said. They talked about small things, a book she was reading, a difficult customer he had dealt with, the way the town looked in early autumn. He was not a man of many words, but the words he chose were always honest, and she found that she trusted him in the quiet way you trust something solid. Not because it announces itself, but because it simply holds. She was not foolish about it. She was cautious, the way people are cautious when they have been let down enough times that hope starts to feel dangerous. But something was shifting in her, slowly, the way seasons shift, not all at once, but irreversibly. Gerald Voss received a letter requesting his presence, along with the family, at a formal dinner at Wolf Estate, regarding regional land matters. Gerald dressed carefully, and arrived with his chin up, Petra beside him in something expensive, Sylvia in her pearls. Nadia was already seated at the table when they walked in, not serving, not arranging flowers. Seated, in a simple deep green dress, her hair down, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Petra's smile went rigid. Sylvia's eyes moved over Nadia once, sharply. Gerald looked at Caden, and then back at Nadia, and said nothing, though his jaw tightened in a way that said everything. The dinner was civil, at first. The food was good. The conversation stayed surface level. Then, when the plates were cleared, Caden nodded at the woman to his right, his lead attorney, and the documents came out. Gerald's face moved through several expressions in quick succession: disbelief, calculation, anger, and then, finally, something that looked almost like shame, though he covered it quickly with outrage. Sylvia spoke first. She said that they had done their best for Nadia, that raising someone else's child was not a small thing, that Nadia had always been treated like family. She was not treated like family, Caden said. He said it without raising his voice, without anger, just clearly, the way you state a fact about the weather. She was treated like staff, without pay, for 15 years. The room was very quiet. Gerald looked at Nadia then, and something old and ugly came into his eyes. "You should be grateful," he said, his voice low and tight. "We gave you a home. We made you who you are. Without us, you would have been nothing." Nadia looked at him. She did not flinch. She did not look away. And then, before she could speak, she felt movement beside her. Caden had stood from his chair. He walked around the table, unhurried, deliberate, and stopped beside her. And then, in front of his attorney, his staff, and the entire Voss family, he did something that no one in the room anticipated. He knelt beside her chair, not with ceremony, not with performance. He simply went down on one knee and took her hand in both of his, and he looked at her, only at her, and he said, clearly and quietly enough, that the silence in the room carried every word, "You were never nothing. You were the most important person in every room they ever pushed you to the edge of." Nobody spoke. Nadia looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were steady, though something behind them was very full. "I know," she said softly. "I think I'm just starting to believe it." The legal matter was resolved over the following months. Nadia did not approach it with anger, because that was not who she was. She took what was rightfully hers, the money that had been held from her, the stake in the land that carried her father's name, and she used it to do the one thing she had always quietly wanted. She bought the florist shop. Mrs. Park was retiring anyway, and she sold it to Nadia with tears in her eyes and a long hug that Nadia held on to longer than she expected. Demi became her partner. They painted the front door yellow, because Nadia had always loved yellow and had never before had a door she was allowed to paint. She moved out of the Voss house on a quiet Tuesday morning. She packed one bag and one box. She had not accumulated much in 15 years, they had made sure of that. But she walked out into the cool air, and she breathed it in, and it tasted different on that side of the threshold. It tasted like hers. She and Caden took things slowly, carefully, the way two people take things when they have both learned that rushing leads to damage. They were seen, months later, at the little farmer's market at the edge of town on a Saturday morning. No staff, no occasion, just two people moving through vegetable stalls and flower carts, disagreeing pleasantly about something. She was holding two bunches of tulips, one yellow, one white, and asking him which he thought was better for the kitchen window. He said the white ones, thoughtfully, as though it were a serious question. She looked at them both for a moment. Then she put the white ones back and kept the yellow. He carried them home without another word, and he was smiling the whole way there.